participating in providing that nutrition and comfort for my child meant more than I could have imagined, I think. Just having been unable to conceive or carry or birth a child myself, the way that breastfeeding just filled a little hole in my sense of womanhood was really, really significant.
Welcome to Breastfeeding with ABA, a podcast brought to you by volunteers from the Australian Breastfeeding Association. Breastfeeding with ABA is a podcast about breastfeeding, made by parents for parents. In this episode, we'll be hearing from Amy, who will be talking about her experience with breastfeeding her adopted child. We're recording this podcast in different parts of Australia. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're recording on and the land you're listening on. We'd like to pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to any Aboriginal people who are listening today. We also acknowledge the long history of oral storytelling on this country and of women supporting each other to learn to feed their babies. My name's Jess and I'm a breastfeeding counsellor with the Australian Breastfeeding Association and a mum of 2 kids. I'm speaking to you from the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation in the northern suburbs of Melbourne.
I'm Simone and I'm a breastfeeding counsellor with the Australian Breastfeeding Association, as well as an international board certified lactation consultant, or some people call them an LC for short. I think I met Amy too. I was thinking about when we actually met. I know I met Amy when I was working in my capacity as a private LC, and I did a home visit with Amy and her husband after she contacted me to help her to get started with breastfeeding her adopted baby. And Amy, I'm pretty sure your sister was a midwife who'd worked with me. Was that right?
That's right, yeah.
I was trying to remember the exact little, the little puzzle piece that brought us together.
Fantastic. Thanks, Simone. So, Amy, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your family?
Yeah. I'm a mum of 2 beautiful kids, and my husband Andy and I live down on the surf coast on Wadawurrung country. We've got a 5-year-old who's come to us through infant adoption, born here in Australia, and we've got a she's 17 months old, come to us through permanent care, also born in Australia, but both have beautiful, diverse ethnic backgrounds, so we're a lovely little multicultural mix.
So can you tell us a little bit about your journey into parenthood?
Yeah, Andy and I tried to have kids for a couple of years without success and, basically unexplained infertility. And so we started the journey into looking into infant adoption and permanent care. And it took about 4.5 years, the process from start to receiving that call that we were having a little boy join our family. So it was a really long one. It was a really arduous one, and difficult and challenging one. But, I guess this process of adoption and permanent care was something that we had interest in regardless of whether or not we were going to conceive. So it was something we were excited about and certainly not a second best.
So, Amy, when did you first hear about an adoptive mum inducing lactation?
Yeah, I can't remember the exact way or time that I first heard about adoptive mothers breastfeeding, but it was likely through an article or a YouTube clip from America in the early phases of our application, just a little Google search and, seeing some interviews there. And, the process of adoption, as I said, took a long time, 4.5 years. So there was heaps of time to read and research, everything while you're imagining adoption finally being a part of your life.
And did you know as soon as you kind of heard that it was a possibility that it was something that you wanted to try?
Yeah, absolutely. I just thought how amazing to be able to provide for my child in a way that I otherwise hadn't. And the research that I'd done just really spoke to the incredible benefits for attachment that it would have between mother and baby in that adoptive process. So, I was really keen to give it my best shot.
I always wonder, when you do mention it to people, a lot of people haven't heard of it. Do you find that when you talk to people that there's a lot of, amazement that this is actually even a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And people don't understand it's possible and they're really surprised. Definitely want to find out more. Wow, how did you do that? So, definitely I get a lot of positive response when people find out. But I think some people are shocked or a bit weirded out, but most people are really amazed and just think it's such an incredible thing to be able to do.
So did you start out with sort of telling family and friends when you were looking at embarking on this process?
Yeah, my sister's a midwife, as I said, and I've got a couple of good friends that are midwives as well. So I had spoken about it with them and, certainly talked about it with my husband initially. In my research, I'd read a lot about how important support would be in order to be successful with it. And so I shared the details of what would be involved because it's arduous on not just you, but you as a couple. And so I knew I'd need his full support and encouragement in order for it to be successful. And he was great. He showed a lot of interest. And although initially cautious because he didn't want me to get my hopes up or be disappointed, we didn't have a baby at the time, so I was just dreaming and we wouldn't know how old our baby would be if we were even placed with one. But he was incredibly supportive in both the initial trial of inducing lactation and during breastfeeding. And I also gave the ABA adoption brochure to my mother and my mother-in-law as well to read so that they could understand what I was hoping to achieve. And having breastfed 3 and 4 children respectively, they were really sceptical and quite shocked really that inducing lactation was possible. But after reading the information and listening to my desire to give it a go, they were really supportive. So, yeah, I didn't receive any pushback, only support, which was amazing.
Yeah, that's really nice. Did you have to do a lot of preparation in the lead up to the adoption in terms of, I guess, a medical process?
Yeah, so from my research, basically I followed the recommendations, that I read, and also I saw a GP to discuss it with her, following some advice from a friend who was a GP. So she prescribed me a contraceptive and recommended that I go on that for 9 months to make my body think it was pregnant, and then go off that and go on another medication, which I think is used for people with diabetes, but has a side effect of producing milk or increasing milk production. So that's what I did. So once I stopped the pill after 9 months, I took this medication as prescribed, along with the natural herbs everybody does, less thistle, fenugreek, etc. And, the diet has recommended oats, etc., to support lactation. And then I gently started massaging and, my breast and expressing 4 times a day. And then I eased into using a breast pump on a low setting for short periods of time, 3 to 4 times a day. So I sort of did that, 7 a.m., 12 noon, 5 p.m., 10 p.m. I was working full time in a new position at the time, so pumping at work was really quite difficult. And I was often ducking off to my car on a lunch break or hiding away in a public toilet to pump. So I found it quite a tricky situation because my workplace, I'd started a new job. They obviously didn't think I was pregnant. They didn't know, well, I wasn't pregnant. They didn't know that I was on the adoption register either. And so, yeah, it was a delicate situation, I suppose. Yeah, certainly expressing milk for a baby that didn't exist also.
Yeah, they wouldn't know much about that, I guess, so it would be a difficult thing to explain. Yeah.
And I found the process quite mentally challenging. And, yeah, emotionally it began to take its toll after a while. As you can imagine, in order to sort of get a letdown, the research was like, look at some pictures of babies and imagine yourself having a baby in your arms and all those sorts of things. And, so we had a little nursery set up at the time in Hope, and so I would sit in there and try and express. But as you can imagine, you're desiring a baby for years and years, and, that time of infertility is such a difficult one. And, yeah, it was an emotional time, and often doing that imagining, brought more sadness than it did milk. So, yeah, it was challenging to get a letdown and get any milk at the beginning, and I needed to tune into my maternal sort of instincts and imagine a baby with me. So, yeah, after 3 months of doing that, I decided I was a bit too emotionally unable to continue, and I made the decision to see it as a successful trial. I did produce some milk, so that was encouraging. But, it was just really disappointing for me at the time that my efforts hadn't coincided with a placement of a child, because that was obviously what I'd really hoped. But I was certainly more confident and hopeful that my body was more familiar with having done it once and the possibility of inducing lactation again in the future. So got to take the wins with the disappointment.
Absolutely. I think that's such a great way to look at something like that you're like, yep, it might not have been the success that I was picturing when I started on this, but it was a success. And to just reframe that in your own mind and within yourself as being successful, I think is really lovely to hear that you were able to do that. So at some point after this, you got to meet your little baby. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so we received a call that we'd been matched with an 11-week-old boy, who we then met a week later. And this was just an incredibly surreal time for my husband and I. He was actually on a work trip in remote Indonesia, so it took quite a while to get through to him to let him know that he had a son. But yeah, he was able to fly back quickly, and we were able to meet with the caseworkers the following day, heard about his background and saw some pictures. And then, yeah, a week later we met him for the first time and began transition with the foster family he was staying with over 3 days before we brought him home. So, yeah, it was absolutely an amazing time, and one that we'd waited for and dreamt of for so long. And, yeah, we treasured every moment. It was bliss. It was wonderful.
It must have been so strange for your husband as well, being overseas and receiving the call to tell him that he had a son. Like, it just sounds so incredibly emotionally intense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you dream about it and you think about what it's going to be like, every day. Yeah, and then it happens, and it's just
happens. Yeah, beautiful.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
So what happened with feeding after you got to bring your baby home?
Yeah, so our son had been formula fed by bottle for the first 12 weeks of his life. So it was 12 weeks by the time he came home with us. And initially by the special care nurses in the hospital, and then by the foster family who looked after him for the following 11 weeks. So he'd never been breastfed nor experienced any skin-to-skin feeding. So I bathed together with him a lot, spent lots of time skin to skin, building our attachment and familiarising him with the smell of my milk, which I'd started pumping straight away once I'd heard about it. Went back on the medication, went back on the herbs and diet and everything, and started pumping again.
Yeah, and I think that's probably when I got the call, probably, I would say.
So Simone, you supported Amy in your role as a lactation consultant. Can you tell us about sort of how you did that? And maybe to start with, you can just sort of talk a little bit about the differences between your roles with ABA and your role as a lactation consultant.
Yeah, so with the ABA, I'm a breastfeeding counsellor, so that's giving mother-to-mother support. I do a lot of work on the breastfeeding helpline and in the local area group meetings and things like that. But in that role, I guess if someone calls me on the helpline, they won't know that I'm a lactation consultant, and that's something I went on to do afterwards, actually because of my experience as a breastfeeding counsellor for I think 17 years now. So I did go on to do some further study and then become a lactation consultant. And it was in that role as a lactation consultant that Amy did contact me. And I'm pretty sure it was through her sister that she knew that I existed. I may have even worked with her at a hospital at one stage. And Amy called me through my business as a private lactation consultant. And so I hadn't helped a woman with breastfeeding an adopted child before, but in theory I knew a lot about how it worked, and obviously I had helped a lot of women to bring babies to the breast who hadn't been breastfeeding as well. So I sort of was pretty confident that I'd know how to help her, even though I hadn't actually, it's not a usual thing you get contacted about. So I was actually really excited though to meet Amy and to meet her little baby. And I still remember walking in the front door and meeting her and her husband and her little son. And, I was excited that she had been able to produce some milk at that point, because I knew even just a little bit was going to be enough to get started. And so, yeah, we just had a really nice session on that first day because we both didn't know whether her son would go to the breast, and that was something that we just had to have a little work on. And she'd been doing lots of skin on skin and some really great preparation, and he was used to being near her already and was very comfortable. So that part of it was a great start already.
And he'd showed a lot of interest in latching beforehand, and I'd tried the SNS a few, on quite a few feeds, or 4 feeds, I think. So he successfully latched on the nipple shield for a short time on each occasion, and maybe got 10 to 30 mils down through the supplementer, but I just couldn't manage the shield and the supplementer and him and getting it all together, and that's what I just really needed help with. But yeah, made a big difference.
Yeah, and look, just to let everyone know what a SNS or a supplementer is, it's basically a little bottle that you would put milk in. You could put breast milk in it. You can put formula in it. Sometimes you can hang them in a little cord around your neck. Some people put the little bottle in the strap of their bra, and it has a very, very tiny fine tube that comes out of the top of it. and you can tape it to your breast or place it on your breast. And then when the baby goes onto the breast, they actually get this tiny little bit of tube in their mouth, on the side of their mouth at the same time. And then they can drink whatever there is on the breast, but plus get extra supplement of that formula or extra breast milk if there's not enough coming out of the breast at that time. So that's how the supplementer works. And then quite often with a baby that has been on a lot of bottles, or obviously in your son's case, he'd only had a bottle and a couple of little sucks on the nipple shield. A nipple shield can be quite handy because of the silicone feel of the shield, and it goes over a woman's nipple, and the nipple sort of sucks into the shield as the baby's very strong suction sucks along at that, and that can remind them a little bit of what their bottle feels like. So sometimes it's a really good transition tool to transition a baby from a bottle onto the breast, just as sort of like a similar feeling to their bottle. And eventually a lot of babies that start off on the shield, we can gradually reduce the use of that shield or just take that shield away, and they'll go on directly onto the breast.
So those were the sorts of things that you were kind of supporting Amy with, were they, Simone, to get those things happening?
Yeah, I just sort of was showing her that, I guess, the ins and outs of using that SNS, a few little tricks on, because you sort of feel like you have to be an octopus and have lots of hands to try and grab everything. And so I was just sort of showing her lots of little tricks and tips on how to manage the SNS and the nipple shield. And he did latch straight away while we were there. He did drink quite well. And look, it's so difficult to know whether a baby of that age will, I've had babies that have been on bottles for weeks and weeks and weeks and get to a certain age and just won't go back to the breast at all. So the fact that he'd never had a breast in all that time and literally just went straight onto it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, he caught on to the idea really quickly, and I expected it to be a much longer transition, but I was just amazed how natural it became for him so instantaneously. And I mean, I remember you propping me up properly with pillows and everything, and then, you put Adam skin to skin upright on my chest to see if he would instinctively move down to the nipple, and he did. And he latched then, and the following day he latched 3 feeds in a row, having the entire 150 ml bottle via the SNS. So it was just an incredible, sensation and experience for me, having not carried and birthed a child, to have a child actually feeding from my breast. It was unbelievable. Yeah. My child feeding from my breast. Yeah, it was amazing.
Incredible. So what other supports did you get apart from, you've mentioned that Simone came and saw you in your home as a private lactation consultant. What other support did you get throughout the process?
Yeah, I did go to a couple of the ABA meetings and did get some support from a breastfeeding counsellor there. I remember it was, maybe 5-6 weeks down the track, and she actually said, you know what, I think you should ditch the SNS. I reckon he'll feed just on you. You should just try, see if you've got enough milk for him to. And he actually did. And that gave me real confidence, like there and then in her lounge room or someone's lounge room, just gave me real confidence that, he was, and he would latch on me. He wouldn't get enough just from me, but he would latch on and have a go, just me and him without all those tubes, which was, again, a really special, experience. I also looked at YouTube clips and followed tips via other SNS users via a Facebook group, and I particularly gained a lot, and in the preparation phase, from reading a book called Breastfeeding Without Birthing by Alyssa Chanel, an American woman, and that inspired me in the first instance and really encouraged me that it was possible.
I guess once you got to that point where it sounds like your baby was able to latch on and drink without the SNS attached, that your supply had obviously started to come up with all that direct contact and that lots and lots of, more direct breastfeeds, which would help the supply probably a lot more than that pump would. And, you got to a point where you were actually pumping a fair bit more than you were at the start. So can you give us an idea of how much milk you think that you are sort of able to get? I know it's always hard if they're drinking directly to know exactly how much that is, but, whether it was half his needs, whether he had to have a top up every time or not every time, or anything like that you could tell us about?
Yeah, ultimately I think I averaged pumping about 390 ml per day. So that was sort of 60 ml combined, like both breasts, 5 times a day. And occasionally I'd have an additional 90 ml if if often my husband did the night feed with a bottle, like that was mostly because it was a special experience for him as well. So we still incorporated that. And so I'd get more on that pump. So it was about half of his daily supply, but presumably he was getting more from me than I could pump. It's hard to know. But yeah, that increased over time. So the first time I induced lactation before our son came along, it was 1 to 2 weeks before I sort of got the first drop of milk via hand expressing. And then it gradually increased to about 10 ml per sitting as I used the electric pump on a low setting. And I was only taking a smaller dosage of the medication then, as instructed by the doctor. But once I knew our son was coming, I took more and I pumped overnight as well. I took a pill overnight and I pumped overnight, which I wasn't doing before. And so, yeah, and I was expressing 4 hourly. So within 2 weeks, I was producing about 3 to 4 mil that second time round. And then, yeah, by 4 to 6 weeks, it was sort of up to 30 to 40 mil. And then, yeah, got up to an average of 60, sometimes 90 mil a pump.
Yeah, massive amount though, when you think about it, you started with, nothing for 2 weeks and then you're pumping up to 90 mils. And then, of course, that's not even counting what he was getting directly from you.
Yeah, so I got to the point where I was feeding him directly with no SNS, and so I'd only top him up via the SNS every second feed. But he was also having solids at that point, so he's 5 to 6 months old by then. So, yeah, it was a big success. And I guess as far as his nutrition content as well, we were really great, really benefited from some donated express breast milk. So he had donated EBM from about 15 women in addition to me. So he really got an amazing nutritional diversity of intake for that period, which was incredible.
I was also thinking, how long did it take you to get off the nipple shield? I forgot to ask you that before.
Yeah, I can't remember now, but it wasn't that long. It was only a couple of weeks, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that it wasn't long. Once you got the hang of it, I guess you can just sort of gradually inch it away. But, yeah, I was pretty sure you were off it.
Yeah, it was really difficult to juggle it in addition to the other things. And, yeah, after a couple of weeks, I think he was fine without it.
Was it ever your goal to get to exclusive breastfeeding, or did you have other things that were higher priority?
Oh, yeah, for me, the goal was that I could breastfeed at all. And I think, yeah, for me, I just didn't want to spend my entire time pumping. For me, just because of you pump after you feed, and they've woken up and then you feed and then they play, and that's their happiest time. And I found myself sitting on the couch pumping, not being able to participate in his happy floor playtime, which, is the funnest part of the day. So, yeah, I didn't go crazy with the pumping because I just wanted to enjoy him and, be present for particularly that happy part of the day. So, yeah, I think that balance I found was important. And over time as well, like I dropped pumping overnight as well, just again so that I was a happier mum the next day.
So how long did you breastfeed your baby for altogether?
We breastfed for 4 months in total. So from when he was about 14 weeks until he was about 7 months old. And he initiated the weaning because he became really distracted during feeds at that age, 7 months, and frustrated at the slow pace of the milk flow from both my breast and the SNS. So I was sad that it ended, but I was also really overwhelmingly satisfied at what we'd achieved. And, yeah, really thrilled at the special time it was for he and I in bonding. And, yeah, I strongly believe that he benefited immensely, not just from my breast milk, but from all those other women, 15 women, and from that contact. Yeah, I think I can see in his health and, in our relationship and connection and, his emotional stability and adjustment that, I'm certain that it made a big difference.
So I'm going to ask about, you have another baby that you've since adopted as well. Can you tell me a bit about that experience in relation to feeding and what sort of happened for your baby to come into your life?
Yeah, we're so fortunate to be placed with a little girl. She came to us at 7 months old through permanent care. So it hasn't actually come through permanently yet, but it will shortly. But, yeah, she's beautiful. And at 7 months old, she had exclusively been bottle-fed formula her whole life. and was also born, in the midst of those COVID times as well in a hospital. So, she had quite a rough start because of her circumstances and spent quite a bit of time in hospital prior to going to the foster carer. Saw a lot of masks in her early days, etc. So she really did she was exclusively bottle fed for the first 7 months and had already started solids by the time that she joined us. So, yeah, we just made the decision that it wasn't going to be quite as feasible and it wasn't worth trying to force an additional thing which takes a lot of effort, a lot of time to try and make work. We had to juggle what was going to be most important for her adjustment into our family and also thinking about our son as well and his adjustment and connection to her. So we decided that trying to add breastfeeding to what was already going to be, a big adjustment for everybody probably wasn't going to work this time round. We certainly did skin-to-skin bottle feeds though, and all those things.
I was about to say that. I bet you wouldn't have let go of that skin-to-skin time because that was so nice with your son. I'm pretty sure you were going to go, right, let's chuck this baby on my chest again.
Absolutely. Skin-to-skin bottle feeds, skin-to-skin bathing, and also that EBM, donated EBM. We were just so grateful.
I was going to say, you did have some of that again, don't you? Yeah. Some of the same donors?
One was actually, yes. One was one of the same donors, which is amazing because they obviously had another child at the same time.
Uh-huh.
So that was very special. Oh, yeah, we only had two donors. Gave us a huge amount, which, we fed her for probably 5 months, I think, exclusively. Yeah.
Amazing. I guess, would you have any other advice to give to adoptive parents that you may meet that are thinking about inducing lactation?
Yeah, look, I'd highly recommend it. Obviously, I had a positive experience, but I just think, with all breastfeeding, this is my only experience, but with all breastfeeding, you have to think about the bigger picture of, what's happening around you. And I think finding that balance between what's healthy for you and your emotional and physical health, and also for, your baby and your other children and, the family as a whole is important. In that first phase when I was hoping for a baby to come and trying this process, expressing at the time did really emotionally take its toll. And so it was important that I stopped when I did. So I think, I just think you have to do it with your well-being in mind. Success won't come if you force the issue, I suppose.
With a lot more social media around, on my TikTok, there's always people inducing lactation, probably because I talk about it, or I talk about breastfeeding. And I get all the breastfeeding women, and I'm seeing it more and more and more. So it's been quite interesting just to see how much milk some people actually can produce. I saw one woman that was producing enough for twins, and induced lactation. I mean, I just couldn't believe when I see that.
She hadn't birthed a baby before?
No, she hadn't.
Wow. Yeah, it's incredible.
So imagine, the human body is so amazing that it can produce this milk basically via stimulation. Actually, I was talking to some women today and I told them I was recording a podcast and they said, I didn't even know that was a thing, and how does that work? And I just tried to explain about the oxytocin hormone and about how breastfeeding isn't purely hormonally driven. In the beginning, there is that whole supply and demand thing that's actually driven by the stimulation and the removal of the milk. And that's what actually makes more, rather than always that you've birthed a baby or you've delivered a placenta, or what it does that triggers the lactation. When that's not there still is that element of milk removal. And if you can get that to happen, through whether it's through the use of a medication or just literally, as you did with the pumping again and again and again just to get it started, then you've got this beautiful baby starting to suck. So then your oxytocin hormone's like going, wow, okay, let's just give a little bit more out here. And that's how it all can sort of escalate, which is, it's just amazing the human body can do that.
Oh, totally. And I guess participating in providing that nutrition and comfort for my child meant more than I could have imagined, I think. Just having been unable to conceive or carry or birth a child myself, the way that breastfeeding just filled a little hole in my sense of womanhood was really, really significant. And the sense of personal achievement and accomplishment, that it gave me after such a long process, and the emotional toll of the preparation stage, it was just really amazing. It was such a special experience that I'll treasure it forever. It was amazing.
You've been listening to Breastfeeding with ABA. For more information on this topic and this episode's companion blog post, see the show notes for links. Visit breastfeeding.asn.au to find out more about connecting with ABA in your local area or to join as a member. To speak to a breastfeeding counsellor, call the National Breastfeeding Helpline on 1800 686 268. It's available 24 hours a day, every day of the year. Our live chat service is another option for breastfeeding support. Check the website to see when it's open. Please rate, review and subscribe to the Breastfeeding with ABA podcast.